I will be short, at least to allow for interaction. Irole yami is to speak to the roles of civil society in building the peace in Zimbabwe. But even before going into that, let me just dial a bit back to 1981, when the idea of the International Day of Peace that we are commemorating today was first conceived. It was actually sponsored by the United Kingdom and Costa Rica, if I'm not mistaken. The whole idea was to silence guns and to allow for peace in conflict-ridden areas to take shape, to enable peace to be an idea, to be a culture in the societies that were now used to impilo ye violence. Kule bhela laphana ku-United Nations, the peace bell, which was built out of coins that were donated from 4 continents. And that bell is rung every commemoration of the International Peace Day. I don't know the reason really, but I know that the International Peace Day was built using coins from 4 continents with the exception of the African continent. Probably we did not have coins then. I don't know, but that's a fact. Also, it is important to note that peace is relative. Peace is contextual, peace is situational. It depends on your own circumstances, your own country, how you define peace. If you are in Afghanistan, you will define peace differently from those that are in the UK, in France, in Brazil, and in those in Mexico will define peace differently. And in our circumstances, allow me to define peace for Zimbabwe. Because I'm not going to worry myself about what others define peace to be. I will define peace and then deploy civil society to that peace, to the quest for that peace. What is peace for me? Peace is, you already know this, it's not the silence of guns, the absence of shooting, but most importantly, it is the presence of inclusive justice. It is the respect of human rights. It is a culture of human rights. When we are talking of peace, we are talking of a culture of human rights, a culture of respecting fundamental democratic freedoms. And therefore, in the context of Zimbabwe, what is it that is threatening the peace? Peace is defined as the respect for human rights and inclusive justice. The threat comes from the state. The threat in Zimbabwe in respect of the peace as I define it, is fundamentally coming from who? The state. And therefore, we have to deal with the violence of unemployment, the violence of poverty, the violence of hunger, the violence of denial of human rights, the violence of impunity, the violence of corruption. That is what civil society's role is. The violence of denial of human rights. So their role must focus on ensuring we generate, we build and protect a culture of human rights. That the state exists not to violate human rights, but to preserve, promote, and defend human rights. If we do not enjoy rights, as I have defined peace from a rights standpoint of view, from a justice standpoint of view, Zimbabwe is in trouble, has no peace, not because we have people shooting at each other on a daily basis, but because Zimbabweans are denied their fundamental human rights. So the focus of civil society has to be the promotion of human rights and democratic freedoms. The focus of civil society organizations has to be fighting for inclusive livelihoods, so that there is no one who goes to bed hungry, goes to school without a meal. There is a fundamental responsibility for civil society to ensure that there is justice. Because as I said, we have to deal with the injustice of poverty, the injustice of hunger. And those are threats to peace. Because peace in the context of Zimbabwe is not the guns as you would have them in other societies, but because people are being denied the fundamental human rights and their democratic freedoms. So it is important that we understand where we are coming from. The long history of violations, the long history of denials, the long history of atrocities. If you have a situation where a person somewhere in Ndebele does not have access to an ID document, to a birth certificate, to a death certificate, that is an injustice, that is an act against peace, because there cannot be peace without human rights, and peace does not exist where there is no respect for human rights. That is our responsibility as civil society organization, to always extend the frontiers of justice, the frontiers of human rights and democratic freedoms. So in the context of Zimbabwe, peace means, and it must mean, that we have a government that respects human rights. We have a government that is committed to the rule of law, as my predecessors have already spoken to those issues. A government that is committed to free and fair elections. A government that is committed to peaceful transition from one government to the other. In the absence of those commitments, we have no peace. And therefore, civil society has to focus its responsibilities to ensuring that those things are there. We are not silencing guns. We are elevating the status of human rights in Zimbabwe. We are not silencing guns per se, but we are generating a culture of respect for our own constitution. Our own constitution. Because peace means having public institutions that respect their constitutions, that are committed to the provisions of the Constitution, that are committed to the Declaration of Rights in Chapter 4 and throughout the Constitution. So I just wanted to emphasize this with the little time that we have now, that peace in Zimbabwe is not peace like in other societies. Peace in Zimbabwe is peace only if we respect the rights of the people, only if we eradicate the injustices and the violence of poverty, the violence of hunger, the violence of impunity, the violence of lawlessness that we are seeing, the violence that is directed at the independent press, the violence that is directed against an independent judiciary. So it is a responsibility of civil society to work together, as my predecessors have already alluded to build coalitions of action for these rights, for the rights, for the rule of law, for an independent judiciary, for an independent press, and for everything that we aspire to as a country. I thank you.